Well, let's add a little depth to our H1 and let's add a border. Now, what I'm doing is I'm combining 3 border rules and I'm putting them all in one. So inside my curly braces for the H1, I'm saying border colon, and this is thin. You could also say 1px for 1 pixel, 5px or 5 pixels, so you could call it in pixels. I want my border to be solid, a solid line, and then this is the color. So this is really 3 rules all packed up in one. I use this many, many times to help debug to see what's wrong with a particular CSS item. Notice how I'm using this same tone of blue for my letters as I am for my border. This is going to give my page unity. It's going to kind of hold things together. And it's those subtle little pieces that give your page a sense of your user will trust your page more if you use these little tricks like using the same colors. Once you get that border in and you look at your page, oh, here's the long version. I could have had you type this out the long way: border dash width 1 pixel, border dash style solid, border dash color 99. Isn't this much nicer? Just one line. And here's what it looks like. So we have a nice dark blue border around our text. Now, did you notice how your border is smashed up against the text? And this is the model. This is like a famous model that CSS is built on. Now, these are made really, really big so I can get my titles in there. But here's your content. This is what the text that's in your H1 or any element. And then around it is padding, and that separates your letters from your border. So here's your border. Now, you already have a border. Yours is 1 pixel. This is about 30 or 40 pixels. And then outside of the border is the margin. Now, we normally don't color these, so you don't see them except for the border. But so you can move your border away from other elements by using the margin, and you move your text away from the border by using padding. So let's fiddle around with that. And we're going to add, for our H1, we're going to add some padding. And you notice how these are building up into 3 columns. This makes your CSS very easy to read and maintain. Now, what are these numbers? Well, this is just like a clock, and it starts from the top. So this is 5 pixels padding at the top, 5 pixels padding on the right, just like we're moving around the clock face now, 5 pixels on the bottom, and whoa, 15 pixels over on the left. So we're going around in a clockwise fashion. So it's top, right, bottom, left. And I was really nice, and I put it in on the comments to kind of remind you how that works. After a while, it'll always be the same. And when you look at your page, oh, we could do this in the long way too. Padding dash top, padding dash right, etc. But you see how much more elegant this is, putting all 4 of those into one piece. And now you can see here's our 15 pixels on the left, and we can see our 5 on the top and our 5 on the bottom. We can't see the 5 over here because it doesn't reach all the way to the end. But do you see the padding and how it moved it away from our border? Now, our margin right now is at 0. Do you see how this all lines up at 0? We can also change the font. Now, this brings in an interesting piece, is the fonts live on people's computers. So if I look at this web page on my Macintosh, I'm going to have a certain set of fonts, basically Verdana and Helvetica. If I look on this web page on a Windows machine, then I'm going to have a different set of fonts, more precisely Arial. So what I'm doing is I'm giving the browser a list of preferred fonts, and I really want the browser to use Verdana. But if it can't find Verdana on that particular machine, I'm saying, well, okay, then use Helvetica. And if it can't find Helvetica, then I say, well, all right, you can use Arial if you're a Windows machine. And if it's on a machine that doesn't have any of those, say a mobile device, then I say, well, use sans serif. Now, what would sans serif, what does that mean? Anybody know? Tony, I know you know what it means. Tony's from graphics, so he knows it's from the print world. Sans is French, means without. So that's the S-A-N part. What's a serif? And I'm going to zoom in on this. And you see these little ticks on the ends of the letters here? I have just these little flicks on the end of all these letters. That's a serif. And that's basically was designed for text in a book to help your eye go across from letter to letter. If you look at these words right here, these are sans serif. That you see they don't have any of those little ticks on the ends of the letter. They're just really clean and neat. Now in print, we like to use serif because it guides your eyes from letter to letter, kind of like cursive. But on video monitors, we prefer sans serif because the resolution is so low. So if you're designing something for print, then use serif normally. And when you do something for the web, then try to stay more to sans serif. Those are general rules. They're changed all the time depending upon the design. But that's the safest way to design things so they look the best. So this means without those little flicky things on the letters, sans serif. What would it be called if we wanted those on our text? We just call it serif, yeah. So there's sans serif and serif. This font right here, which is Courier New, this is a serif font. Up here, this I think is Arial or Helvetica or one of those. Again, you always want to give the browser a choice of at least 3 fonts to pick from. Don't just give it one font because most likely that won't be on that computer. So give it a list of 3 fonts from your preferred font for your design down to just any sans serif that's on the machine. Did you have everything spelled right? Make sure you spelled Arial right. You have to spell everything exactly right. And do you see how this came out sans serif? You see how it's different from the font we were using? The default for machines is Times Roman, so did it all come out or not? Did you find a typo? No typo, huh? Let's keep going and we'll make sure that, oh, do you have a semicolon on the line before? All right, so we were missing a semicolon up here, and that broke all the lines afterwards. So don't forget that semicolon. All right, good. I love it when we can fix it. Now, there's lots of heading items. So what you can do using a comma is you can say H1, comma, space, H2, comma, space, H3, H4, H5, H6 on up. And you can do the same thing for all the headings. So that's also going to give unity on your page. All your headings will look the same. They'll have the same look and feel. And this is part of the cascading of cascading style sheets, is we do a general rule like this for all of them, and then we come in and we do a specific rule for each one. So here, this is for all of them. They're all going to have these common traits, but H2, we're going to override and have a lighter gray on the background on the H2, and we're going to set the border to none. So first we do this general rule for all of them, and then we go in and specifically change each one individually. And it's this cascading concept of going from general to specific. Now, those in web programming, as you go through the programming classes, you're going to see this idea come up very often, where we take a general idea in programming and then we get more specific as we go along. This is one of the hallmarks of object-oriented programming, or OOPS. Again, go through your mental checklist and say, do I have my open curly, my closed curly? Do I have colons at the end of my rules? And at the end of my lines, each line has to have a semicolon. On your comments, make sure you have your start comment, and don't forget your stop comment. And finally, did I spell everything right? Did I put a dash under background color? Is everything spelled properly? Up here on the fonts, are the fonts all spelled correctly? And when you display, you'll see that here's your H2, and the border's off, and it has a lighter gray in the background, so you can see how we overrode it. Now, if you're a great programmer, what you're going to go in and real quick is you're going to do an H3 or an H4, and you're going to see what those look like. So you might want to go in your code really quick and put in an H3 and H4. And what will you expect? You'll probably expect something that looks like this, only in a smaller size. Because you'll notice we didn't change the size on our H's. We just said what the background's going to be, the foreground, and the border. Well, let's get adventuresome now and style the P element. Let's style that paragraph. So we're going to set up our new tag. Notice we're going to do the P and the unordered list, which is our bulleted items. You could copy and paste these lines from your H1 and then just fine-tune them over here in the values. But if you want, instead of retyping all that, just copy and paste it from your H1 code. Make sure that it's inside your set of curly braces for these elements. And when you change your values, then change your information in your comments. All right, so here's our paragraph now. So you can see our paragraph now has a stronger, bolder look with gray in the background.
My words are blue too.
Then if your words are blue, then you would go up here and look at your color, and I bet your color is 000099. Yeah, so this changed it to black. Whoa, what about the body element? What's the body element? Isn't that your whole page that displays? So this is a great place to set things that you want to set for the whole page. So you can set on your body element, you can set your font dash size and set it to small. Now this is changing as America grows older, because we're all, in fact, the globe, everybody's getting older. So this is kind of changing to medium. As everybody's eyesight gets weaker and weaker, like my own, we'll be really appreciative of having larger text on the page. And if you're 18 or 19, you won't appreciate that for another 20 years. But when your vision starts going, all of a sudden you really appreciate not having to look at little tiny type. So for your whole body, you look at background dash color. We're going to set this to a really light gray. Notice it's all E's except that last F. This is like a really light gray blue. It's a really pleasant background. So remember that as a nice background color. And this is where the fun part comes in. We're going to say background-image, and the URL is like saying, look at this file name. So we're saying, look, stands for Uniform Resource Locator. But basically, you can think of this saying file, and then this is the name of your file that you saved earlier at the beginning of the tutorial. So whatever you named that gradient, that long strip, that's what the file name you want to use here. Now, hopefully you follow the naming convention, so you started with lowercase, you used camel case on the new words, and you kept everything lowercase, including the JPEG. And I'm just going to scroll down here so you can see what it's going to do. So here's another shot of that if you want to do a right mouse click to get that gradient. But here you can see how we changed the page. And what that did is that little stripe here repeats all the way down the page. And you can build these gradients in GIF and Photoshop very, very easily. I can't show it on the screen, but if you have a high-resolution monitor, what's going to happen is your gradient is only going to reach so far, and then it's going to repeat. Right here, it's going to repeat on over again. So this dark part is going to repeat at the end of your gradient go over. In order to get that to stop, what you want to do is right here after the URL, let's see, where's my gradient? Right here after the URL, or do a new rule, and it would be background-repeat. Would somebody look this up for me? Make sure I get it right. It's background-repeat, I believe.
Is it in the book?
Colon, yeah, it'll be in Appendix B or it'll be on the Spark chart. Colon. Okay, and then no dash repeat. So let me write that up on the board. Now this is an invaluable trick for seeing what's working and what's not working, and that's to use your border. Now I just threw this in really quick for the UL and an LI. I don't know if you all have a rule set for that or not. But I said a UL and an LI. And again, you could copy this background color, font family. And then this is the trick though. I put in border, thin, solid, and just put the color red. And this is just to help me debug the page. And right away, I can see that this is my unordered list and this is my LI. And you see how quick those come out? It'd be even better if I had done these separately and had the UL be red and maybe the LI purple. So whenever you wonder where something is landing on the page, slap a border in there, and you can always delete it out or comment it out, and use a garish color so it really slams at you so you know exactly what's happening. You could do this on your H2. You could do this on any of your elements. The more you do CSS, the more useful that border trick will be. Now, so far, we've just been using the tags that come with HTML. Oh, with the border. Okay, I'll go back with the border. Yeah, on one of your elements, either your UL, but any of your elements, like you could do it on your H2, just put in a border, make it thin, solid, and red, garish, just so you can see where it's landing. And again, once you find out where the piece is, when you start doing page layout, this becomes really valuable. So did a red border show up for you? So far, we've just used local elements, but you can also customize your elements. And there's two ways to do that. You can do a div tag or a span tag. There's also two kinds of attributes, and I'll show you about in a minute. One is one per page, so that would be the ID. And if you're going to use multiple things on a page, you would use a class. Now, these are just terms right now. I'm going to show you how to use those. If you go into your code, and let's say I want to make this a bright red. I want this to come out a bright red. I want to emphasize it. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to use the div tag, which stands for division. So I'm going to say div, and I might do this a couple times on a page. So I'm going to say class equals, I'll call it alert text. And I'm just going to move this on another line so I can do it. And then down here, I'm going to do my stop div. So do you see, basically, I'm marking this block of text here with my division tag, and I'm going to give it a name of alert text. And then I'm going to stop that. So this is just all like all the other tags where we have a start tag and a stop tag and a name here. Everybody have that someplace on their text? So now I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to say dot, which stands for class, down here. Do you see how I named it class? Well, when I do it in CSS, that comes out to be a dot. If I call this an ID, it would be a pound sign. But so right now, it's a class, so it's a dot. And then I'm going to call it, with no space, I'm going to say alert text. So that's my new tag. And I'm going to say color red. And I better put a comment here so other people know what I'm doing. So mark this text bright red so user pays attention. Now this is kind of a silly example. Many times I set this up so like coding, I would set my font to be Courier and bold and a certain color, and then people can tell when I'm using code versus regular text. So I'll save that page. I'll open up a new browser, new Firefox, and you can see that in my text, it made that bright red, because this is what I marked out with my div. So this is marked out my div tag. But so this is not, you can see that this is not valid, but also we got a problem here because this was a paragraph and look how it broke it all up. The div makes a separate block. Does everybody see that? So that works out fine if we want to do a separate block like outside a paragraph, or we could do a div like for this whole section here. We could do this as a div and say give it a margin of 50 on the left or 150, and that would indent this whole section. Everything inside this div tag would insert. So maybe we can do that in a minute, but I got to fix this. I don't like how this breaks up my paragraph. So let's go back into our code, And I'm not too friendly with a div right now. I don't like what it did. But I have a trick up my sleeve, and that's the span tag. So what the span says is don't make a new block. Now don't forget to go down and change that stop div to a stop span. So it says don't change that whole block, just mark this text. We'll go back to the web page. And you see the difference between a span and a div. So my span went across, no block, and look at my HTML validator. I now have a valid page. So you can use span inside of other blocks like a paragraph. Let's go into our code and do that div for that whole section and set our margin off. So let's say from right here, I want to say div class equals indent block. Do you see how I'm being really descriptive on my naming? And then I'm going to go down to right before advantages, and I'm going to do my stop div. Now, this is a trick that I've learned that's really useful. I'll say end of, what was it again? What did I call it? Indent block. End of indent block. So at the end of every stop div, I put a comment so I know which stop div that is. When you start doing page layout, you're going to have a lot of stop divs. So now I can see that my code, all of this right here is going to be, this is going to be my indent block. Everybody get that? Again, div class indent block. So now I'm going to come in here, and what's the class symbol again? Is it a dot or is it a hash mark? The pound sign. What do we do for this class? This alert text class, what did we use? What symbol? We used a dot. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say class indent block. Notice my naming conventions. I don't have to wonder, is that uppercase, lowercase? Always start with lowercase, no spaces, and capitalize new words. And what should we say? We're going to say margin. And my top margin is going to be 0. My right margin is going to be 0. My bottom margin is going to be 0. And my left margin, I'm going to make it about 200 pixels. I'm also going to leave myself a note, indent these blocks from left. A quick look at my page. And now you can see this would be a great, if I wanted to put a picture in here or a menu or something, this would be a really great way to do it. And you see it automatically scrolls in, and that whole block of text that I marked with my div tag stays indented however many pixels. So here's back at the code again. Again, the dot stands for the class name. So it says class indent block. Put in my 2 curlies. And follow the same thing. Here's my margin. And if you want to troubleshoot this, you can always do your border. So let's do border. I'm going to be really bold today. 3 pixels, purple, solid. You can do those 3 in any order that you want. And I look at my web page, and you can see, oh, that's my div. That's my block. once I've seen that, I can either just comment that out or I can just delete it. So let me go over that again. I wanted to mark out my block, so I called it a div. I gave it a name using the word class. This is my class attribute. And then how did I mark the end of my block? Stop div and a comment. Notice on my comment, I used my little coding that I already learned. So I mean that means class. So what's the difference between span and div? Div starts a new block, so think div is blocks. And what does span do? It spans what it's inside of an existing block. So like inside, mostly you use a span inside of a paragraph. And what is class? That's how you name these things. Now, class means that you can use it a lot of times. So I can come down here and I can come down and say, I'm going to change this. I'm going to say down here, div class. What did I call it again? Indent block. So I'm going to come down here and say indent block. And here's my stop div. So I'm going to say end of indent block. Just put a comment to myself. I go back to my page, and you can see my page here. Now watch. You see how this is a block and this is a block. These are classes. Now, oftentimes I only want to use something once, like a header or a footer or a menu, and in that case, I would use ID. So I could do something like this. I could say div ID equals header. And I'll do my stop div. End of, and this is how you designate an ID with a pound sign. Again, that's just a comment for myself. Now, I might have a little bit of text in here. I might have an H2. I might have an image. I might have all kinds of stuff inside this block. Here's how I code it. I go pound header. Oops, got to spell it right. Put in my curlies. And then I could say, I'll just say border 2 pixels. Let me go back to my purple. This isn't going to be very pretty, but and then when I look at my page, oh, I'm going to do something else in here. I'm going to say padding 20 pixels. There. Now, you see now this is my header, and I have all my pieces inside my header, and I'm controlling all my pieces inside my header. Here's my, and there's only one header. I'm having multiple indent blocks. So I had an indent here, but I only have one header. Later on, as we get into more complicated pieces, you'll understand how this works. So here's the 4 things. We have our span, which works inside of paragraphs. I can't find my span. Where's my span? Oh, here's my span. And we have our div, which makes its own blocks. And then how do we name them? Well, we can either name them using class, which means we can use them multiple times on the page. So like I could have multiple alert texts or multiple indent blocks. Or we use the ID tag, which is only used once. I only have one header. The way these things are named, the dot means class. We can do things several times. The pound means ID. And as you get more involved with different things in HTML, you'll see that pound come up more and more often. We use it several times to designate one thing on the page or a unique item on the page. So here's some places that you could use a div. You could mark out headers, menu areas, footers. When we do page layout, you're going to find the div to be really, really useful. Any place where you have blocks. The span is used inside of a paragraph or wherever you have text. Now, here's an example. Here I did a div class. This is on my book recommendation page. And so this is a div, and then I repeated it here and here. So you see I repeated it over and over on the page. So this is how we do little blocks inside of blocks. And this is one of the styling things of CSS. So you can repeat blocks that way. And here you can see a div class is repeating. I did my bullet and then my stop div. And again, you can see here this is the dot for class and the name. And then I set up exactly how I wanted my bullets to come out. So now I formatted this whole block here the way I wanted it to. We used to have problems in the different browsers that these bullets would get out past the margin on IE and other browsers. So by doing code like this, you keep that from happening because you put everything into one block. It's a little extra step you have to take with bullets. Many times when you do pictures and you align that picture to the left, your bullets are going to go into your picture. So this is a way to get around that. All right, here's some best practices. First, write a single CSS attribute at a time and then view the results. This is kind of satisfying because you get instant gratification. And it's also a lot easier if you make a mistake, you can find it on one line instead of 5 or 6 lines or 20 lines. You know, what would you rather do? Find a missing colon or semicolon on one line of code, or look at a whole page trying to find that missing colon? Format your CSS code into 3 columns. Now, the browser is really fine for you doing CSS like this. And many times when you go out on the wild, out on the web, you'll find that people have written CSS like this all the time. Now that I've worked with the 3 columns, I can hardly go back to this. In fact, I popped up some CSS in my advanced class yesterday, and we all kind of laughed and giggled because it was so ugly. And it was code I had written too, which made it even worse. But the browser can read that, but you can see how much easier it is for us to work with 3 columns. Now, you can see in this example, you're not going to line up perfectly, but I try to keep this middle column kind of lined up. And this is one of the reasons why I did background, as I used the single background with the 3 parts with color, URL, and the repeat, because then that makes the background shorter. And then I can move all these columns to the left. Now, one thing that I've started doing is I move all of these in line with the name of the element. So I use this space here. I move all this stuff in line with a curly brace, and that gives me more space for comments and stuff. Write to your future self, as well as anybody else that might be working with your CSS code. Be nice to yourself in the future. Add comments specifically when you talk about colors. So if you throw in hex code in there, put the color in there. Now the question is, am I going to repeat this comment all the way down my CSS code? Let's say I'm using 000090 for a dark blue through all my CSS. Am I going to comment every single one of those? Well, I go back and forth. If it's really obvious, I don't. But if it's possible that this might change in the future, then I comment it because I might be moving that CSS to another place. So kind of use your best judgment, and when in doubt, comment. Now, if somebody else comes into your code and sees it well organized and really well commented, they're going to have a little warm fuzzy about you, and it's good karma. They're going to say thank you under their breath, or they might even see you and say thank you, but they might never ever see you. They're still going to send you a little karmic thank you, and you'll get a little warm fuzzy from heaven. When you open up your pages in the future, you'll say, oh, I'm so glad I did it this way. Write things general and then get specific. Just like I showed you how to do the H1, H2, H3, H4 all in one clump. Then we went in and we customized the H2 header. We'll do the same thing. Write your rules, general, and then get specific. And this is a really big gotcha. This will happen as you get more experience with CSS. But don't duplicate your code unless you have to. Most often when I help students debug their code, they have layers and layers and layers of H2s or paragraph code, and they keep changing as they go down the page. So what you want to do is you want to have one block that does one thing, and don't keep repeating it all down the page. Don't do like 4 or 5 H2s, because you'll be changing one at the top, and then the one at the bottom is the one that's going to affect your page. So keep things simple, keep things organized. Again, this will come with experience, but if things are going wrong and you've been working on it for weeks, go back and see what you can cut out and edit. And probably you'll get rid of a lot of the mistakes that are happening. Become an expert. Make a checklist in your brain. Now, professional coders do this and they solve problems quickly. Any expert in any field, they have a checklist that they go through. So here's your checklist. And again, the number 3 should be number 1. Did you spell the darn thing correctly? Look things up, don't guess. Look things up in the Spark chart. Look things up in the head to see how you spelled it. Even feel free to copy and paste your code to make sure that everything matches upper lowercase. Check your curly braces, check your colons, check your semicolons. If a line is broken, check the line before it. And here's a neat trick. Check the order of things. If something's not working, copy that code, paste it up near the top of your CSS. And if it starts working, then you probably have a semicolon curly brace missing or problem. I've also shown you the border trick, so use the border trick. Oh, here I threw some green in there. Green, purple, pink, these are all great colors. So slap a border inside one of your elements, and then you'll be able to see where it is really quickly. Use outrageous colors and different colors for each piece so you can relate to which block is where. You know, don't use red on everything. Use red, use purple, use green, and right away you'll be able to see the different blocks and you'll know what they go with. If you have lots of CSS, a really complicated file, use your Control F to find things in your text editor. That way you could like search for an H2 and find out you have 2 or 3 H2s that you've been styling. So keep that code simple. And you've all heard this trick already, but you know, make your pages X-rated. If things aren't happening in CSS, put 3 X's on your page somewhere on a H1 or H2, save it, view it, and if those X's don't show up, you know you're not editing the same file you're looking at. And don't forget to take your X rating off once you figure things out. All right, so you should have a nice feel for formatting, commenting your CSS, using your CSS. Probably one of the most useful pieces that you'll use over and over is the div and the span elements. These allow you to customize certain blocks. And then those attributes, ID, which is how many? 1. And class, which is how many? Many. And what's the symbol for ID? Pound sign. I have one student in this class. And what's the symbol for class? The dot or the full stop. Yeah, the full stop. The dot or the full stop. And what's the great way to debug things? Go through the checklist, your expert checklist, and visually use a border. Okay? So there's your CSS. If you want to see the complete source code, you might have missed something as we went along. You can right mouse click, save this file, and you'll have all the CSS I used in here.